We'll just... Hopefully this is working. Are we on? Is this thing on? We ask ourselves.
I don't know.
I don't know. The intertubes, they're just like problematical.
Well, there's a lot of storms around. So again, we're going to say tonight, if we leave you abruptly...
It was not our intention.
Not our intention.
It's like, yeah,
Oh,
I think
my
we're there.
goodness.
I apologise for the tardiness. Yes.
Things have just been interesting.
But there you go. Oh gosh, now apparently
Susan is still the purple number 1.
Well, there you go. Well, who's number 2? Who's number 2? I don't know.
Savannah's
number 2. Well, there's only 2 of you there, so one of you's got to be 1 and 2. You're going to fight each other to get the crown.
Is this just for this broadcast?
I think so. I was trying to look
see.
it
Like
up
Savannah
earlier.
has made 2 posts, so she's number 2 because Susan has made 4 comments. So she's number 1. Is that how it goes?
Savannah's got a spammers with hearts and all that sort of stuff, and I don't know what it is.
God.
But hey, who knows? And now Wendy's there, and Wendy's made number 3. I am not a number, I'm a free man.
And Carol is also number 3.
Well, that's interesting. Perhaps they're third equal. They came on at the same time. This is terribly exciting, isn't
strange.
it? They just started this, so I think it came on halfway through our Magical Monday. So
To us, yeah.
to us, I have no idea how it is, but apparently, if you look at the top of the screen, you can see how many points you've got, and it's like a leaderboard. If you click on it, I don't know. They're just trying to do some weird stuff.
We can't see that on our side. We can only see what it does up there.
We've no idea, but enjoy if it makes some kind of sense. I don't know.
You get points for each comment.
You get 25 points for each comment. Oh my gosh.
But what do you end up getting?
Nothing. I think it's just to prompt people to interact with you. I think that's the idea.
Well,
do you
I
want
don't
to start?
know.
Shall
Yes, certainly. You coffee.
I'm sorry.
Alrighty. Chapter 13.
It's the lavender you have on your
We
back.
get points.
Oh, we get... No, we don't get points. Do we get points? I don't think we get points. Well, we get the super chat. Well, we get a percentage of the super chat.
Anyway.
They keep some of it.
All right. Meanwhile, Chapter 13.
Yes.
Next morning, I started roughing out the designs for the wall paintings with charcoal on the wide expanse of none too smooth plaster. I had not bargained for the wall painting when I had the plastering done. The War Department had considered whitewashed brick good enough for this thin red line of arrows.
Eros. Well, it's call them, innit? Eros. These
without the
Eros.
H. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. Miss Morgan, however, had declined to let me have the gypsum-faced, so we compromised on a coat of size slapped a size. Oh, the size is like the putty.
Yeah, size is like...
slapped on by Trenthowen.
Trenthowen, yes.
Miss Morgan had a few things to say about size when next she saw me. I told her she ought to have known the fort in the days when the jackdaw was at large in the water tank. And then she would be thankful for the small mercies. Oh, because remember, the dead bird made everything stink.
Apparently, yeah.
Size is only cow's heels. It is a perfectly wholesome smell.
Oh my.
The whole of one end of the big room was occupied by a fireplace and bookshelves surrounding it. It's rather a nice idea, I think, to have one's fireplace framed with one's books. I have it in my room. Morgan Le Fay, moreover, had her bookshelves made of cedar, and they imparted a most delightful smell into the books. I know, for I was always borrowing them. An old book has a fascinating smell anyway, and when it's been kept on cedar wood, it's a delightful thing to have in one's hand.
Isn't that true? Yes.
All right. This left spaces between the narrow Gothic windows and the blank wall at the far end to be dealt with. For the first of these, I planned a wind-blown sky and an empty sea seen under fitful sunshine. The next should be drifting mist and oily dark waters, and all things half seen. Then came the steel gray stormy weather and white wind-blown crests. Lastly, a calm sea by moonlight. That's a very elementally kind of thing.
Well, it's particularly
These were all surface scenes, but for the end of the room, where the wall was unbroken, I planned a panorama of the deep sea places with the mermaids and whatnot, and Miss Morgan herself as the sea priestess for the centerpiece.
Oh, hello.
I guess he can draw people.
I guess he can.
This was all approved with the exception of the centerpiece, about which she was not told, so was not able to express an opinion.
Oh dear.
The draperies were what Kipling calls
Hermaphrodite.
Herumphorite.
I don't know what a...
And the features a smear, which is as it should be, inspirational paintings. For I had an idea that these paintings were going to be something more than my own composition. I knew that in the lights and the shadows were going to appear all sorts of faces half seen, as they do in some old puzzle pictures, such as we had in bound volumes of antiquated magazines in the drawing room at home. First one sees just an ordinary picture, and then one discovers that the lines make a picture within the picture, and one finds the jockey hidden in the horse. I believe that is, in some ways, if I gave it up to myself, the life that was behind the sea, and how it would be interpreted itself in my paintings.
Me? Okay. I managed to get the whole scheme roughed out in charcoal that first weekend, which was about as much as I expected to do, for I knew I should spend a good deal of time talking to Miss Morgan, and I did. On the Monday morning I departed with an armful of borrowed books in the back seat of the car, and my head humming like a hive. Morgan Le Fay was indeed strong meat for a Dickford bachelor. Clients found me a trifle absent-minded all that week, and Scotty looked at me with a sour eye. The office boy was openly sympathetic, for which I could have cuffed him, and I believe Scotty actually did. Miss Morgan had talked of tempera, and when I came to investigate it, I had my doubts of it in that damp sea air, and anyway, it was a wicked ramp for such an acreage. She was so immensely amused to see me turn up next Friday in the back of the car full of tins of house decorators' paint, and why not? You can't beat them for bold effects because they have body. I also obtained magnificent opalescent effects in both waves and clouds by slapping on the paint in sticky streaks, then combing it with an ordinary hair comb, in the same way as the end papers of books are marbled. Oh, well, hello. Miss Morgan was hugely amused when she saw me at work, but she admitted that the effect was fine. Anyway, I got results and got them quickly. Well, with all the groundwork roughed in, there would still remain the finishing touches to give, and for this I had to await my inspiration. It was my intention to watch my chance and commune with the sea in whatever mood she might be when I arrived, and then work on the corresponding panel. And the first mood she gave me was, appropriately enough, wind-blown space and broken light. So I went out to the end of the reef, although Miss Morgan made protesting noises, and there I communed with all the sea life around me. All sense of the land fell away from me as I stood and looked to the west, where no land could be seen. A seagull or two sailed past and was gone. A spar went by on the racing tide, and then the sea and the sky were empty, and I was alone with the waves. The sun came and went in fitful gleams, and light lay on the water in patches. Here and there a wave was crested with white, but for the most part the sea ran without breaking, in a short, sharp swell that came cantering in and crashed upon the rocks. The sea was not in strength today, but all the same it was not to be trifled with, and there was a darkness in the west that was more than the gathering dusk of an autumn afternoon. It was cold out there, and the tide was rising, and a wave got my ankles and made me wild. So I was glad to come in where Morgan Le Fay was sitting, smoking, waiting to make tea beside her driftwood fire. My feet were wet, and I had received no inspiration, and altogether felt rather cheap. However, I cheered up, and we talked till late, and then I slept till late, and finally, resisting all temptations to go out to the reef again in the morning sunshine, I got to work on the first of my paintings.
Now, I do not know what had happened out there on the reef, or what had been the real significance of the wave that caught me around the ankles, but as soon as I got to work, I knew that there was power in my painting, and I saw in my imagination all the life that is behind the sea, and it seemed to me that there was an intelligence behind it, a mind, not unlike our own, but vaster and vastly simpler. The life of elemental nature differed from our life in degree, but not in kind. It had the same kind of corporate being as a hive or a herd, which is not embodied, but overshadowed. And if I chose to see this life expressed by such lines, it would express a similar life in a human face. Why not? So I gave to the steep, short waves shadowy lineaments. Here a brow, there a mouth, but nowhere a face complete. And each of these partial forms express the same way of life, a bright, inhuman, heartless animation. Quite beautiful in a rather pretty way, but completely soulless, as are some young girls. One only, I think, gets great beauty where there is a mind behind it, as in Morgan Le Fay.
Yeah, beauty's more
And
than
so
skin deep.
all day I drew the sea life of the smaller waves, such as had gotten me by the ankle. In the sunshine there was a sparkle like the gaiety of thoughtless young things, gay with their own vitality, but in the cloud shadows one saw clearly that it was all pretty heartless. Well, that's a great mural to paint, isn't it?
Wow.
When it was finished, I was rather tired, and Morgan Le Fay came and sat beside me on a stool and talked to me as I sprawled on the sofa before the driftwood fire. For I was too tired to eat until I had rested, and she took off her necklace of star sapphires and gave it to me to look at, and I watched the queer cross of light shift and flash in the stones as they caught the flame. And there was a very curious magnetism about them. I have sometimes wondered why she used to let me hold her necklace and play with it. That night I dreamt of the sea, and I dreamt of Morgan Le Fay, but I dreamt of her as a moon priestess rather than a sea priestess.
Does it differ?
And in some curious way, I knew that the moon dominated the sea, and that Morgan was something bigger than a sea priestess. Next day I walked up with her to the top of the down to inspect the cairns. It was not such a scramble going up along the spine of the down from the point, rising with the rise of the strata, as it was to go straight up along the rabbits from the road, but I managed it all right. The cairns were interesting. I know of nothing more fascinating than trying to read the life of forgotten people from some scanty traces of mound and cairn. It was quite clear to me that there had been here on the sea down a college of priests. The ancients, placing their temples, always looked for impressive sights, something that would fire the imagination of the hoi
polloi.
What the hell? It's such a vocabulary. And wherever you get anything striking in the configuration of the ground, it is safe to look for the traces of an ancient worship. There it is, not always easy to find, if neither Barrow nor Dolman mark the site. For a druid grove is no different from any other grove, and a cairn soon disappears.
Up here, however, on the bare and lonely down, no one ploughed the shallow soil, and no one attempted to cart stones by that perilous road. So the cairns lay where they fell, and one traced them by the symmetrical plan of the patches of fallen stone on the arid grass. 2 by 2 they marched along the spine of the down, and very fine they must have looked when they were all standing beside the processional way. White stone pyramids, built as dry walling is built, to the height of the reach of a 6-foot man. I guess that they led from the point of the headland back to the spot where the perilous path took off that led to the cave of Vigil. And sure enough, when I looked among the bracken and the loose soil of the warrens, I found the white stones where I expected to find them. We were tremendously thrilled. I forgot all about my asthma and cantered about like a 2-year-old. On the very crest of the down we found 3 great stones lying fallen, and guessed that they had been the 2 uprights and lintel of a pylon. And as nearly as I could judge without instruments, one could sight through them to a similar pylon, or even a stone circle on the crest of Bell Knoll, and gaze right into the eye of the rising sun on the longest day. We also guessed that, as the line of cairns ran down toward the point, something special had stood on the site of the fort. But the War Department, blasting its way to perdition, had erased all that.
Great.
However, I told Miss Morgan of my vision and the sea pyre flaming at the uttermost ebb of the Neap, and we wondered whether, when the further rocks were laid bare, we should find the traces we sought. It was a tremendous thrill, and Mrs. Treth banged the gong 3 times before she could get us to come in for dinner. That dinner, being Mrs. Treth's idea of what was becoming on a British Sabbath, we naturally slept after it.
While I slept, I dreamed. What I dreamed I do not remember, but something like a white-robed priest cleared off into the dusk as Mrs. Treth roused us by throwing wood on the dying fire. We walked out to that point to look for the last of the sunset, but there wasn't any sunset that evening. Everything was dull and cold and steely gray, and we were glad to come in again. Over the teacups, I told Morgan Le Fay of my dream, and she looked at me strangely. I had a kind of idea that she wasn't surprised and that things were going to be as she hoped, and even better than she hoped. She rose and left the room without a word. When she returned, she had in her hand a leather case. She opened it and took out a large crystal. "Would you care to look into this?" she said, and put it into my hands.
Oh, aye.
It was surprisingly heavy for its size, and I rested my elbows on my knees in order to support the weight, and I gazed into its heart, where strange light shone, reflected from the fire. It was icy cold when I first took it, but presently, with the warmth of my hands, it began to warm. And as it did so, it seemed the light within grew brighter. Maybe it was only that the fire was burning up, I do not know. Then I noticed that the misty golden glow within the focus to one sparkled point that, as I watched, was on the move. Afterwards I realized that it had moved in time to my breathing, as the rise and fall of my chest altered the angle of my arms, and consequently the point of focus of the light within the sphere. But I did not realize this at the time, and watched the moving point fascinated, thinking, here were psychic phenomena in good earnest. It had been my experience that all objective phenomena I have ever come across admitted of a naturalistic explanation, and that the real kingdom of fairy is within. Anyway, be that as it may, the moving point of light hypnotized me in the good old-fashioned manner, and I expect Morgan Le Fay knew it would. And the warm golden glow of the crystal spread and deepened, and presently it flowed all around me and enclosed me in a golden cloud. And through the misty glow came the voice of the sea priestess, commanding and asking questions. And I told her what I saw, and I saw a long line of the down and the cairns standing 2 by 2, white pyramids of moon fire. Here were the fort stood now, was the stone-built palace, archaic, like the palaces of
Knossos.
Knossos?
Yeah, it's in Greece, isn't it?
It sounds Greek. And out at the point was the wide flat space with a hearth, and there were little sea pyres when the tide was at uttermost ebb. And when the tide rose, the waves received the fire, even as I had seen in my dreams. The pyre was built of sweet-smelling wood, and was the sacrifice and tribute of earth to the sea, because the sea is the senior. Around the blazing pyre, the white-robed, gold-belted, shaven-headed priests stood in a semicircle, waiting for the first long wave to lick the pile, and as the flaming brands fell hissing into the water, they chanted the chant of the sea that makes peace between the sea and the land, and bid the sea remember that the moon ruled her, and that she should be obedient thereto. They hailed the sea as the oldest of created things, older than even the hills, and the mother of all living. But they bade the sea remember that the moon is the giver of magnetic life, and that it was from the moonlight on the sea that the living forms arose. For the sea is formless, but the magnetic moon is a giver of form to the life of the waters. These things I said, and then I woke up and blinked, and Morgan Le Fay took the crystal out of my hand and told me that it was enough for tonight. But having seen these things, I never lost them. It was easy for me after that to reconstruct the forgotten life and see it all about me, moving in the ancient ways. The effect of that experience was curious, for I lay back on the great chair and my breath came deeply and easily to me for the first time since I started with my asthma. And this thing I knew beyond all gainsaying, that the gates of life were opening to me, and that I had thought had been closed forever when I turned down the offer to go to London, and that for me, my life was once more on the move and progressing and no longer turned back into its stagnation.
Oh, so things are looking up for our hero, tell your friends.
I don't know if he's a hero.
Well, you know, he's the key character of the book, isn't he?
Oh,
so
come on.
anyway, stop throwing the
My
stuff to the
little
floor.
moon crystal.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So we're up to chapter 14, if you're following along, boys and girls. So, life for me was a series of weekends stuck together. The eyes of Scotty grew more and more stout.
Sour.
Sour! Oh gosh, I'm sorry.
He don't like him going out there.
Yes, all right. More and more sour, and the eyes of the office boy bulged more and more eagerly as I returned to work Monday to Monday.
What'd you do this weekend?
Each time more muzzy and absent-minded. All the same, there was no more asthma for the time being. I didn't care a hoot about what happened to my immortal soul now that my body was becoming inhabitable.
Ooh.
Oh, there you go. Even my mother, who seldom notices anything, observed my freedom from asthma and remarked that she had always thought I should outgrow it. I have often wondered at what...
Outgrow it? He's like in his 30s, isn't he?
Oh, how old he is. I don't know. Nobody tells me anything.
All right.
I have often wondered at what age my mother will consider me mature. I was living in a kind of dream world, and the only things that were real to me were Morgan Le Fay and the fort. But by the way of compensation, something else was becoming real to me. The curious kingdom of the moon and the sea. Having once seen the faces of the water, I could thence after see nothing else.
That's a word. Thence after.
Thence after. And as the waves came rolling in, I sensed their mood. Every rock for me had a personality, and presently I began to sense the moods of the winds. Fire, of course, has a life of its own. Getting in touch with the unseen is like taking to drink. Once you've started, you can't leave it alone. I found too that it was in my power to reconstruct the forgotten life of a place and see it as dream pictures in a waking dream. With such toys to play with, was it any wonder that I turned away from the life that had yielded me so little nutriment and went exploring the secret paths of the unseen? With the development of this strange awareness came also an insight into the relationship between Morgan Le Fay and myself. There was a very curious sympathy between us, and it meant a tremendous lot to me. I was not blind to the fact that I was fully prepared to fall head over heels in love with her if she so much as crooked her little finger, which was not a thing to be surprised at in Dickford, virgin of either sex. Although I was the only eligible bachelor in Dickford, that is, if you count an asthmatic as eligible, and had been pursued like an electric hare in consequence. I had always been mindful of the poem. When I thinks of what I is and what I used to be, I always thinks I throwed myself away without sufficient cause. That's a poem.
Well, you didn't read that B. You said used to was.
Oh, okay. Let's try that one again then. When I thinks of what I is and what I used to was, I thinks I throwed myself away without sufficient cause.
See, that does rhyme.
Now, you has to say it in West Country, don't you, innit? All right then, my lovely.
All
Marvellous.
Right. I admit I had done a certain amount of necking with little bits of local fluff. But my innate caution prevented me from ever getting myself mixed up with anyone who could reasonably expect me to lead her to the altar. My pater had played the fool over half the country, so I suppose one might say I was salted before I was born.
Oh my.
To my credit, be it said, that my necking ended at the neck, though in some ways perhaps that is a pity, for love is like the measles. If one gets it at a proper age, it is a childish ailment, but taken later in life, it is a serious matter.
Oh dear.
When I went down with asthma, my doctor asked me if I had been crossed in love. Well, I said, you know Dickford as well as I do. Is it likely? And he agreed with me that it wasn't. Consequently, when I came within range of what could have been a genuine article, I was as susceptible as a child to the measles. The breed of females round Dickford are, I fancy, quite exceptionally itless. Districts are like that. One valley will be a mass of pudding face, and the next will have pretty girls on every blush, and behind them too. Anyway, Dickford offered precious little in the way of temptation, and how my pater ever managed to do what he did is a mystery to me. I suppose I am my father's son to the extent that I have nothing much in the way of a conscience in these matters, my inhibitions, such as they are, being aesthetic, not ethical. If there had been anything doing with Morgan Le Fay, I would certainly have done it, but I knew deep down in my heart that there wasn't, and that anything of that nature would have broken the magic and messed everything up. I also knew, however, that Morgan Le Fay did not mind my loving her, that it did not worry her in the least. Now in Dickford, if a fellow falls in love, he proposes, and if he is refused, you do not get to meet again for a decent interval. Someone going to stay with relations or something. Or if matrimony is not indicated, you go away together for a weekend or behind a hedge according to social position. In the literal meaning of the word, I was weekending with Miss Morgan every week of my life, and if anyone from Dickford had ever set eyes on her, the reputation of both of us would have gone to glory. So one might say that the arrangement had all the drawbacks and none of the advantages of a liaison. All the same, I was getting something very definite out of it. Though
what that something was,
it would be very difficult to say. There were times naturally when I wanted more than I got, an occasional upheaval of boilings over of consequence, of which Morgan took not the slightest notice, in the same way as she shuts the family pet up in the outhouse on occasion, and does not refer to the matter. The great thing was that she let me love her quite naturally and without worrying about it. I suppose temperaments vary in these matters, and some folk placed as I was would have taken carving knives to each other. I admit that I promised myself that when things came to an end with Morgan Le Fay, I would go off in the rocks on the point, for I did not see the fun of going back to my family and the asthma and Dickford. Meanwhile, I had got something at last that made my life worth living, and I had neither illusions nor scruples. I developed no complexes. Our medico, yarning in my hayloft after he had attended me professionally, said that in these matters folk could be divided into sadists and
Masochists.
Oh, masochist. That doesn't look like that word sounds.
It's
I'm
spelled
sorry.
differently in English.
Okay.
I'm sorry. This book is written in English.
Alrighty, I'm like, what is that word? Okay. Divided into sadists and masochists, which in plain English, is the boots and the doormat. Sadists black their doha's eye or insult her in front of the butler according to social position, and masochists are never happy unless the lady just knocks the plain hell out of them. Life is very odd. I think I incline towards the masochism myself, though there is a limit to what I will stand in the way of hell.
Anyway.
Jesus Christ.
Hasn't come up once yet. All right. Anyway, Morgan Le Fay as remote as the moon was a lot more to my liking than she would have been to my mending my socks. Then she would have been mending my socks. For then I kept my dream of moon magic and sea palaces, and had my love of the princess of the powers of the air. And all this would have turned to dust like Dead Sea fruit had she degenerated into flesh and blood. Morgan Le Fay, by letting me care for her without fear or favour, and by letting her woman's magnetism flow out towards me unchecked, gave me, though I never laid a finger on her, what is lacking in many marriages. Moralists talk of sublimation, but that is because they do not know what I learnt of moon magic. Out alone with Morgan Le Fay at that fort. And so I think to love her as she let me love her is no bad remedy for sin, and a dash sight better than the wrong sort of marriage, provided, of course, you are not the type that blacks folks' eyes when you wax affectionate. And so we got on very nicely, Morgan Le Fay and I, and day by day the fort turned for me into a sea palace, and Morgan Le Fay into a sea priestess, and I lived more and more in another dimension, where I had that which I knew I should never have here on earth. And I was very happy, though possibly a little mad, but anything is better than Dickford and the asthma. And so the weeks slipped by, just a series of weekends as far as I was concerned. Something new had entered into life for me with my friendship for Morgan Le Fay. I borrowed her books, and she cooked me the most amusing meals, teaching me to appreciate food as I had already learned to appreciate wine, and talking to me of life as she had known it, and incidentally of her philosophy of life, which was exactly what my own would have been if I had not been carefully brought up. All that I had always regarded myself as original sin, I found elaborated into a code of morals by Morgan Le Fay. There was no question whatever about it, but that my asthma improved enormously. But there was something else that improved also, with what I can only call, to borrow a term from our medico, the breaking down of my ethical adhesions, and that was my capacity for creative design. I remember once hearing the story of one of the greatest modern painters. When he was young, he was a good young man and minded his mother and painted like lids for chocolate boxes. But one day, when he was on holiday, he dived off a rock and cracked his skull and became a great artist. But he no longer minded his mother. I was indubitably beginning to slosh the paint to Morgan's walls in style. There is one thing to be said for modern art. You can make up your style, your own technique as you go, and do not have to laboriously to learn a tradition so long as you get your results. The fact that I splashed house decorators' paints onto rough plaster and combed them with a comb I used for my hair was nothing against me as an artist. In fact, with some folk it was something in my favour. I must say, however, that I had behind me the laborious draftsman's training, for I should have been an architect if my father had not died prematurely and thrust me into the position of responsibility before my time. Consequently, when I massed my waves or my clouds, it was with the architect's innate sense of proportion, and I knew better than to try and do figures.
And so, as I say, the weeks went by. I got all the donkey work done in the designs, if that is the correct term for it. But I had to wait for inspiration from the mood of the sea before I could work in the half-seen forms that showed forth the innermost spirit. I had finished the panel of the calm, shallow sea, and Morgan was thrilled by it. But I knew that it was only the beginning, and that there was more to come. And presently it came. I got up one Saturday morning and looked out the window and couldn't see the opposite chimney pots. Well, said I to myself, if it is like this here, what is it to be like on the coast? As soon as I saw the blinking fog, of course I began to wheeze. Though I had slept peacefully all night, it was banking up, which shows how mental asthma is, though it doesn't seem to make the slightest difference to know it. I came in to get some clean shirts, which my sister was supposed to be mending but hadn't, being concerned with higher things, and she heard me wheeze and wouldn't give them to me, saying I wasn't fit to go out to the fort in the fog. So I went round to the co-op in my dressing gown and brought some navvies
back raspers.
raspers.
What the hell are they?
I don't know. And had to put them down on the housekeeping account and brought them back over my arm, unwrapped up.
That larnder? I take it that's West Country for that taught her a lesson.
She never tried to trick again. People who value public opinion are at a very great disadvantage in dealing with people who don't, because he didn't carry one out in his dressing gown.
Yeah.
Then I went round to Beadmore, our medico, and got him to shoot me full of dope. You aren't fit to drive, said to me when he saw the car outside. That needn't worry you if it doesn't worry me, I said. But what about the other folk on the road, he said. To hell with the other folk on the road, I said. That's just what I'm afraid of, he said. It was not too bad going, though, the town, and one could see the sun like tarnished brass disc sailing above through the fog wreaths. But as soon as I crossed the swing bridge into the marshes, it began to coal up in the earnest. I don't suppose I could see more than a dozen feet. Luckily, the road was straight, and there is never anything on it except an occasional cow. But I took the car along pretty carefully, for there were deep water cuts on either side. She was a saloon, and a saloon can drown you in 3 feet of water.
I toiled along at about 10 miles an hour for an eternity, and presently I came level with the farm, and Trethowen, hearing me, came out. He said he hadn't been able to take the car out to the fort that morning, and Miss Treth had to leg it, and he begged me not to try. But I knew I couldn't make it on foot, with that pull up the gradient of 1 in 4. So I told him that what would be, and he sighed and gave me the milk. Morgan, it seemed, was living on tins at the moment. I got up the gradient all right. One couldn't very well help with that, for it was well banked on the side of the drop, so that one slid along in a kind of slot. But I very nearly overran the hairpin bend, and it was only the banking that saved me. Even so, I butted a good bit of it down, for I was grinding along in bottom, and she shoved like fury. I always run a high-powered car, so as to avoid gear changing as much as possible when I'm seedy. However, what kind of language is this?
I don't know.
However, I survived and came out to the crest of the down. Then I got the full brunt of the fog in my face. There was a slow, cold air moving, and the fog came sliding along in big banks. It got on to the inside of the windscreen as well as the outside, which was a thing I have never seen before. I switched on my big headlights that I use for fast driving at night and that everybody hates me for. But it was just a waste of battery, and I switched them off again and continued to nose my way foot by foot. It would not have done to run off the road, for one stood a very good chance of rolling over and over into the sea. I couldn't see a thing. In fact, I could hardly see the end of the bonnet. For you in America, that's the hood. However, we toiled along, the radiator boiling like an urn at a school treat. What with coming up the hill at foot pace and now this rake's progress, as for me, I thought I was never going to breathe again.
Presently I felt the road dip towards the point and thanked God for it. I honked to announce my arrival, and Morgan came out and opened the gates for me, of which I was glad, for I cannot manage them when I am short of breath. If ever anything looked like a sea priestess, she did, standing there in the fog, her sea-green gown and fog dew on her hair. She wanted me to come in and have some coffee by the fire, but I wouldn't, for this was the mood of the sea I wanted to catch. So we went out to the rocks of the point, and I stood still and listened. It sounded dead quiet at first, but as soon as you listened, the air was full of sound. Away to the south, the starboard lightship moaned on the 2 notes, earned in the name of cow and calf. Out to sea, 2 or 3 ships called and replied, and an invisible fishing smack rang a bell. The slow, slight heave of the sea washed and swashed among the rocks, and the fog kept on the move the whole time. It wasn't as still and as quiet as it seemed by any means. I told Morgan Le Fay that this was the sea mood I wanted to catch, and begged her to leave me alone and go make the coffee. She murmured a bit, for she was never too fond of me going out to the point, but the tide was up, so I couldn't go far, and she agreed to go in. I watched her pass through the fog, almost invisible in her pale draperies as she moved graceful and sure-footed over the rocks. Then she was lost in the mist, and I was alone with the sea. The smother closed in around me, and everything disappeared except the weed-grown rock just under my feet. The fog passed over my face with a curious, soft, impalpable touch, like the feel of fur. The big ships mooed and hooed, and the smack moved slowly away, ringing its bell like a lost sea leper. Then a sudden rift opened in the fog, and a patch of pale sunlight shone through it, and I saw the sea for the first time. It was pallid silvery gray, as if diseased, and it rose and fell with a slow, languid, sickly heave. Yes, it was a very sick sea. Believe me, fog did not agree with it. Then the fog closed in again, and the faint far moaning went on, and the seagulls cried from the rocks like wandering souls. I had had enough of it, and turned to come in. But as I turned, I skidded, and before I knew it, where I was on the rising tide. I was in the rising tide up to my knees. It didn't matter. I had +4s on, and couldn't take off my shoes and stockings and dry them in front of the fire. Morgan having calmly taken the shirt off my back for the same purpose on another occasion, but gave it me a curious turn to feel that each time I had communed with the sea out on the point, it seemed to clutch at me, and each time it had a hold higher up. First the ankles, now the knees, by the time I finished that last panel. What cold clutch would rise to my throat?
Morgan Le Fay was upset when she saw I was soaked to the knees, for I think she had the same thing in mind. They had never recovered the body of the poor moon calf. He was gone for good. The channel deepens suddenly just hereabout, and whatever does not float on the surface slides off to the cod and corpse-fed conger eel,
Nice.
and gets eaten before it can bloat and rise. However, Morgan gave me coffee, and I changed into dry gear and felt better. My asthma had disappeared completely. I know of nothing like a shock to clear it. I once fell downstairs during a bout and felt absolutely normal as I sat on the mat at the bottom. Dusk closed in early, and by 3 in the afternoon we had to light the lights. Morgan put camphor and cedar and sandalwood oil into her paraffin, and her lamps smelt as sweet as they burnt. And I had brought some muffins with me, and we toasted them at the driftwood embers, and they picked up the curious iodine tang of the sea, as well as the delicious flavour of wood smoke. Morgan Le Fay had taught me that things cook quite differently over different kinds of fire, and that a gas oven can never take the place of bright wood embers that diffuse a soft lambent heat instead of the dry harshness of gas. There, she said, there were different kinds of woods, and for some dishes nothing but coals of juniper would serve, and told me the old rune. Take 2 twigs of the juniper tree, cross them, cross them, cross them. Look at the coals of the fire of Azrael, and we forget all about the cold clutching hands of the sea and the poor moon calf who was gone to come no more. Interesting. She asked me if one day I would like to look in the coals of the fire of Azrael, and I asked her what it meant. And she said that one made a fire of certain woods and gazed into the embers as it died down and saw therein the past that was dead. We would do this, she said, one day, and then we should see all the past of the high sea down and the hollow land of the marshes reconstructing itself. When this happens, I thought to myself, the sea will get me round the neck. Morituri ti salatumas.
We had a wonderful meal that evening, even if Morgan were killing tins with a can opener. She cooked me clams as the Americans cook them, in butter and breadcrumbs. She had brought back recipes from every land she had ever traveled in, and she had traveled in a good many. It was fascinating to sit and watch her cook and hear her talk. The spirit flame burnt blue under the great copper chafing dish, and all the little bottles caught the light. I felt as if she were compounding for me an elixir of life, and to tell the truth, I fancy she was. For a woman like Morgan Le Fay, who knows the arts of moon magic, can compound a very curious elixir for a man's drinking. There is a virtue in her hands that passes into the food. I would fire a cantankerous cook even if I had to live on dog biscuits for the rest of my days, for everything she touches she poisons for a sensitive person. Next day I woke up at dawn and went out to the point and saw a marvelous sight. I saw a frog roll back in the sun, and the sun came up. The fog, roll back, and the sun came up. A light, fitful wind came in from the open sea and pushed it into the great wreaths, and the sun shone down of a cloudless sky of the palest autumn blue and caught the little waves that followed the wake of the wind. All the sea was a sparkle with pale gold, and the fog, snowy white, lay along the coast in a blank bank that hid the land. It was as if all the world had sunk into the sea, only the high sea down remained.
I climbed to the crest of the down, where the 3 fallen stones of the pylon lay, and watched Belnol slowly emerge from the haze, and thought of the vigil kept day by day in the landward-looking cave. high up on the breast of the cliff, and wondered if I had ever kept it, coming down by the perilous way along the ledges before first light, or watching by a fire of driftwood through the long darkness. I promised myself that Morgan Le Fay would soon have her fire of sweet woods. I knew where I could lay my hands on cedar logs, for one had blown down as near us in the summer storm. Sandalwood was to buy at any price, and juniper grew on the hills behind the town. Yes, we would light a fire of Azrael before we were very much older, and I would look into its coals and see the past. Then I came to breakfast and found Morgan Le Fay with her eyes starting out of her head, for she had made up her mind that I had gone in off the point. I'm sorry. All that day I worked on the second panel. I painted the rift in the mist and the pale sun coming through and the sickly silver sea that heaves so slowly. And down the sea lane thus opening came the shade of the Flying Dutchman, a ship of antique shape, her sails hanging aslant, her ropes trailing in the water, and on her high forecastle a great barnacled bell that had been sunk long centuries in deepest ooze. Does she do this alliteration deliberately?
I don't know. It's really crazy. Slow swirls of water followed her forefoot, and through them showed the faces of drowned mariners who clutched at her stem as she went by, and some of them had no faces, for the poor moon-calf they had gone down in the deep water and made one with the sea snakes. Morgan Le Fay did not altogether like these things. She said she had not got to live with this picture, for it was terrible, and I said, "You have chosen to live with the sea, Morgan Le Fay, and the sea is terrible. Perhaps some day I, who love you, will be like these things, without faces." She looked at me strangely, and I said, "But meanwhile, I have today." Hi, John. I haven't seen you in a long time. Thank you for the kind words.
Oh my goodness.
That's our Sag friend.
Hello. Globe-trotting John, yes.
All right, then. We are at chapter 15, folks.
And I think we can't really start 15 because we're going to be here till 10 if we do. They're getting longer and longer.
No, this one is, this one's only 3 or 4 pages, but I think this is a good place.
I think 15 is a good place. We did 2 chapters.
Yeah, that's about it.
Cool.
2 chapters a night.
That's cool. What a good book. Oh,
I don't know. They're trying to read
the
these
alliteration
words.
and the fact
your tongue gets tangled.
My poor sweet darling bunny has to deal with English, and we do spell things differently, which makes life.
Well, like center, I understand. R-E instead of E-R, but that word
colours and stuff like that. Yeah. You go, what the hell is this word? I mean, it's like, for example, you guys spell jail J-A-I-L. We spell it G-O-A-l.
Yeah.
And that's, you look at that word and go, what is that? Goal?
What is that?
That's not goal.
Yes.
Go owl?
I don't know. It'll be all right. We'll get there in the end.
Or is it G-A-O-L? I think it's G-A-O-L.
G-A-O-L? I don't know.
Yeah, jail. Anyway.
Tire. T-Y-R-E.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because the other one means tired, doesn't it? Like I could go to sleep.
T-I-R-E, not T-Y.
Well, we spell our tires as in cars with a Y. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway.
So there.
It's all good.
So we have to say that. So isn't it interesting? So it looks like in interactions today, Susan got the number one thing, which has obviously got to be,
she had the most comments.
Yeah, because Savannah's vying for position 1, but it looks like Carol and Wendy also got position 3. So I think this is a new thing. We're going to see how it works at our next live stream. So we can see you can do that. We have no influence on it.
I don't even understand how it works.
I looked it up, and I think it's just a thing to try to promote interaction so people can sort of get their way up the leaderboard.
And it also might help with...
It's like bragging rights.
It might also help with algorithms and stuff, because I know that's a big thing that's coming up.
Would be cool. We'd love to be less of a well-kept secret, because we in our minds think we're sort of vaguely entertaining, you know what I mean? So, that being the case. All right, well, there you go. There's your chapters for today, your 2 chapters. I don't know who's on next, whatever we're doing next, but catch us next time because we're bound to have something interesting.
Yeah, I think next
Something.
time we have another Sunday night thing.
Is it a Sunday night thing?
Yeah, everything is Sunday night, 8 o'clock. For the Academy of the Occult.
For the Academy, yeah.
Right.
It's either a course or a something.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Nobody tells me. I just do what the voices in my wife's head tell me. So there you go.
You'll be all right, dear.
All right then. So
All
thank
right.
you so much. Have a beautiful
Peace.
evening. Be well.
Thank
be
you.
blessed. And we'll catch you next time. Bye for now.
Bye.